Well, thank you everyone for being here today at iGaming Next. It's a great honor for me to be a guinea pig and also have the opportunity to connect with all of you, either now or later, while waiting online for a gin and tonic. I think we'll have plenty of time, to kill time. But the one thing is that I'm first going to introduce myself. I've been at Betsson for about 2 years as global head of media. And as I said, it's an honor for me to be here. And forgot my lines. But the one thing is, the way I would like to introduce this panel is based on the fact that we come from a common denominator. So during the earlier sessions, what we were talking about are some of the sea of sameness and commonalities that some of the brands have within the iGaming industry. And here we have a set of panelists, great talent panelists, who come from an advertising and media agency background, but also have, for some of us, decided to take the side of the advertising side, some of us the agency side, some of us media owner and tech, etc. But without further ado, I think that it's not about me, it's about the panelists today. I'm going to introduce this person. She is someone who you will never see her real face for. If you look for her on LinkedIn during this panel or later on, what you will see is her avatar. She's a newly awarded talent, won the iGaming Next Idol Award as the Marketeer of the Year. She comes from an agency background, now works on the casino side for Weekend as the marketing director. And I would like to welcome Valentina Diaco. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
So the other thing I wanted to point out is that setting up a panel is sometimes very difficult when you try to create diversity, because you could look into talents within the island, or you could search for talent from outside. So the three gentlemen that you have here actually do not live in Malta, and are not yet, and they're not specifically working on the or in the iGaming industry. So the next panelist is someone who came straight up from London, father of a beautiful child. We got to know each other a bit more through the conversations in preparation for this panel. And his mission throughout his career is to enhance user experience through contextual targeting, leveraging artificial intelligence. Yes, artificial intelligence is real. And I would like to welcome Ollie. Then last but not least, this other person, actually, yes, there are two more. The other person comes also from very far, very cold. He is a... Excuse me? Oh, yes, he is a senior person within the industry, very much feared by advertising agencies, respected by publishers, and as you will find out, hopefully, very much needed on the advertiser side. He comes straight from Stockholm, works for a company, and founded actually a company called ECI Management. And the specialty of this company is about auditing. So basically, the role of Fredrik Kinge is to audit exactly how we work with advertising agency. Welcome, Fredrik.
Thank you.
Last but not least, I prepared this yesterday. So trying to get to know the people before I introduce them, because it's not always easy, and I just wanted to diversify this a bit. Last but not least, also coming from London, a bit easier to introduce. He might come from London, yes, but also could come from Silicon Valley, USA being a big topic here. He arrived just now, about, an hour ago, going to leave at 9 p.m. this evening, I just found out. He is the industry manager at Google, and I would like to welcome Oliver Levy. So, to frame the framework, I think that it's important for me to clarify a little bit what POEM means. It's a framework that many advertising agencies have used, but also advertisers as well. And what this means is that within a consumer journey, there are different touchpoints that being devices, platforms, and media channels that you're experiencing throughout the day, throughout the year, or during a campaign. Some of them are paid for. It could be TV, paid search, display advertising, programmatic, paid social, etc. Trying to reach the audience, trying to trigger some sort of attention. Then, once you capture the attention, you have another paid media channel that might come up, Google being one. You remember the brand, you engage with it, you click on an ad, Google search engine result page, and you end up on what's called owned media. Owned media is something that the advertisers own. It could be a website, it could be an app, it could be a Facebook page, something that is managed internally by the advertiser. The earned piece is what you gather from the brand that you're building, the connections that you're building with the people that you are reaching. So some of the earned measurements that you can come across sometimes, but I'm not going to get into the debate further, are the likes, the reviews, the attention that the brand gets, etc. With that in context, I think that now I'm going to start and kick off the questions, but I would like to ask the audience, maybe Ollie, given what it is that I just mentioned with the POEM framework, what do you think is the biggest challenge that we face within our industry, in iGaming, when it comes to understanding how this plays out across the multiple brands that we operate in, but also the maturity of the industry?
Yeah, so thank you, Ulrich. So I think there's a couple of challenges that the iGaming industry is facing at the moment. And I think part of it to do is from the initial planning cycle, right? So having the right stakeholders in the right place early enough to be able to put forward a successful marketing framework is always going to be a challenge, and trying to get those people together. So I think, firstly, that's a big challenge. And I think secondly, which I think we'll probably touch on a little bit later, is moving away from that direct ROI from their advertising campaigns and looking at a bigger, wider picture.
Good. Seems like you want to jump on, so go ahead,
Yes.
Valentina.
I think that we have two challenges for brands to build their own presence through this POEM framework. The first one is the media landscape that keeps evolving. We are living in this massive and immersive media era where consumers have much, much more power. They can actually shape the values of our brand. They can help producing and creating a product. They can collaborating so much with our brand. So I guess while before was was perhaps easier to distinguish the paid, owned, and earned media, today we are in a very difficult position. And I think today, at iGaming Next, during our first marketing track, we can coin and establish a new framework, which perhaps can be called the C POEM. We have paid, owned, earned, but also co-created media. So there is this massive collaboration between the final users, the brands that are shaping up the values of the company. I think is one of the most fundamental parts. We have been listening yesterday at different panels where we actually saw some of the most innovative and social platforms popping up.
It's an interesting point that you bring in, because that's one that's really close to my heart. But I'll jump to you guys as well. Further into the question, to make it a bit more precise, in following up a little bit with what it is that Valentina mentioned about co-creation. How much co-creation do you see happen in other industries, Fredrik, when it comes to co-create, meaning have the media elements connecting with the creative?
Yeah, I would say, in my experience, and I totally agree, it's getting harder today. It was easier 25 years ago. It was about, do you have the right creative, and then you spread the message, and everyone could have the same reach within the media channels. So that has always kind of been a challenge. How do we work with things? Now the consumer has more power. They will influence and interact in a different way. But I would rather look at the key point that I see as a challenge and opportunity is also it's more fun now with the complexity, but it's also about avoiding the silos in a way. I mean, there you have the different types of media groups, and you have co-created as well, adding that here. You want to avoid silos between creative and media. You want to avoid silos between the different media channels. You might have different teams. I mean, 25 years ago, there were no in-house teams. You had the advertising agency, the media agency doing the buying. But you also have silos within each media group, from strategy, planning, to buying. So that's the biggest challenge and biggest opportunity. That's why I think it's so exciting to work, in your category, but also other categories, that media can truly be the way to win in the market today, because it can be so differentiated depending on how you operate within this network of, paid, owned, earned, and then co-created as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think if I can...
Oliver, yes, absolutely.
Build on that really quickly. I think the co-creative space is really interesting. I think that, and Fredrik, we spoke about this backstage before, about this kind of attention economy piece and the kind of demand generation. We now watch what we want, when we want, how we want. And it's not enough for a brand just to kind of shout out their key message now. You need that value exchange. And that's where co-creation really kind of comes into its own with these creators that can tap into this audience passion points and blend that in with the brand message. And I think you see that in some markets more than others. So I think in America, with the launch of with the Passport appeal, you're actually seeing the likes of FanDuel and DraftKings really interact and engage with creators now in that space. And it's something maybe some of the more mature markets haven't quite done to date, but are starting to now. But I think going back to kind of the title of this panel of brand building, I think the largest challenge that we come across typically is measurement, ultimately, especially from the branding side, kind of tilting away from performance. Having the aptitude and the understanding of what it means to build long-term brand equity and how that would be a long-term revenue driver for a business, and not just focusing on what's happening that day or that week, and actually having the strategy and measurement in place to actually understand what's going to happen in the long run.
I think this is a really good point, and something in particular that iGaming industry as a whole is kind of struggling with, and I think you're probably about to say the same thing as me, is that, within this industry, probably more so than others, I work across entertainment, sports, FMCG, but one of the biggest challenges is that if you're not seeing direct ROI from a click or from an impression, particularly in this industry, people deem that as unsuccessful advertising. But as to Oliver's point, it's a longer game than that now. We need to think about the proper advertising funnel. We all got taught it when we learnt marketing is, you start at the top with big brand advertising and you work down. And I think within this industry, everyone's just trying to skip to the bottom. So I think that's a really important thing to think. And I think people are starting to change. A lot of the clients that we work with now in this space are starting to do that more and more and more. But understanding that if you're doing a big brand ad, you're not going to get an immediate ROI, and that's completely okay.
Yes.
And I think there is also another challenge, which is the technology, is the infrastructure, is the difficulties of find how to establish this data layer that both enhance a massive and immersive experience to the final players in our case and industry, and also that give the ability to marketeers and business strategists to really understand the data, our first-party data. So I guess there is another blocker there, which is also a massive opportunity at the same time.
Yes. I'd like to chase you a little bit, Oliver, on one of those things. We spoke a bit before this panel, and you mentioned that you're working with other iGaming brands. So specifically to the iGaming industry, do you see some of the other brands that you work with closely adopting the POEM framework and also paying attention to the co-creation that Valentina brought up in the very early stage of this panel? Are they mature enough at the moment, or have they adopted this type of approach, or not yet?
It's hard for me to argue. Obviously, coming from Google is going to talk about the benefits from a paid media perspective, and about the teams that we work with and partner with at these operators. I think it comes into kind of the overall goal in terms of an acquisition and retention strategy. I think paid media is going to allow you to go beyond your existing customer base, with owned and earned, typically drilling up frequency of existing customers. So great from a frequency stance to keep your customers there, communicating the benefits and values of your platform and why they should stay with you as a betting operator. But paid media allows you to go out from a demand generation stance. So whether you're looking to acquire new customers in the short term, develop that brand equity in the long term, but go beyond just talking about the initial promotions that are available, but deliver that value exchange. So going back to why they should choose you over the other 20 operators that are available to them in that particular market. There is a paid owned earned media strategy typically in place. But I think from an owned and earned stance, it's quite hard to cut through against a new audience unless you do have a promotion in place. And that's where paid really comes into its own to help drive up that awareness and consideration and bring people down from the top of the funnel down to the bottom.
Thank you. Coming back to the co-creation, and I know this is not one of those questions we have prepared, it just came across my mind, so I'm going to be spontaneous, but I think it might be a bit provocative. Advertisers pay rather substantial amount of budgets on YouTube, hoping that the advertising, the beautiful creative that is well thought of, gets picked up and then gets viral and grow. But very often you see content on YouTube that gets picked up and doesn't really require any paid media investment. Would you say, what would you say the secret recipe is? And do you think that the Google machines have already identified what it takes for creative to succeed? Coming back to the ABCD framework, that's where I want to get to.
Yeah, definitely. So at Google, we've run studies looking at over tens of thousands of creative campaigns. And kind of going back to kind of a machine learning business, which we ultimately are, we have developed kind of what we call an ABCD best practice, which ultimately looks at what are the creative necessities to achieve awareness, consideration, favorability, whatever it might be. And I think research from the likes of Nielsen and multiple research companies have said creative is going to be the biggest effectiveness driver you have available to drive ROI. So if no matter what your targeting is, no matter what your placement is, if your creative's not right, it's not going to cut through ultimately. We do have those frameworks in place, and they can help you to achieve your goal, whether it be whatever it is you're trying to achieve. When it comes to a kind of a co-creation stance, I don't think there's any, or even just a pure ad stance, there is no silver bullet. I think from all the research studies like Les Binet and so forth, we know that if you can achieve that kind of legendary fame status, so you think about kind of compare the market and the Meerkat, for instance, in the UK, it has achieved that. That's what's going to drive the highest ROI for you as a business. Is there a secret sauce? Is there a secret recipe? We get to find it. But I think that's ultimately the kind of the holy grail.
I think the stat from Nielsen is that it's 49% of a campaign's success is attributed to the creative. And one thing within iGaming as well is that a lot of the creative piece isn't great for branding at the moment. I see a lot of brands at the moment trying to shoehorn their performance creatives into a brand creative, and they think just by doing something exactly the same but maybe bigger, when you're talking about display, for example, that will work. But if the creative message isn't adapted to help you build your brand, it's not going to be successful ultimately. So I think that's a really important point to think, is that you can't just do the same thing but bigger and call it branding. You have to have a good brand message as part of that.
Thank you. How about you, Fredrik? So your background, and you are a veteran in this, your background comes very much from the agency side. You are a well-known auditor in the industry. And what you specialize in is auditing the media. How much of the creative do you think comes into play when you need to evaluate the media?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been important, the creative, the message, of course. And there's nothing more expensive than buying the wrong strategy. So even though we help advertisers to ensure that they're paying the right price for media, reaching their audiences, and either have in-house teams or agencies that have the right data and metrics to benchmark against, creative will always be, the thing you need, otherwise you're wasting money. And the stronger the creative is, this is something we see as well, the importance really of setting media objectives. So, unless you set a specific media objective and have accountability to that, you're just spending money. And the media objectives can be differentiated and depending on the creative. If you have a strong creative, go to Google and build some mass reach. If you have a creative in a clutter market that needs more repetition, fine, then we need to buy in a different way. So really understanding how should we define the target audience, the effective frequency. I mean, there's a huge savings potential, I would say, minimizing excessive frequency. And this is something I see in your category, on TV, but also online media, that sometimes, many of the specialists can be almost too good to focus in on the target group and using data, whereas other categories are getting more spillover. But creative is important because you can save media dollars if the creative is good, and you always need to integrate it. You need more than your own data as well, which was the first topic of today, like really looking at insights from consumer tracking, awareness, brand positioning, the brand studies that you mentioned. So you can have this ongoing feedback loop and then adapt the media buy based on that, and always changing. That's why I love this category of media and so as well. 20 years ago it wasn't that much fun. It was easier then. Now it's hard. So now it's really about optimizing and using the data. And it's a revival of the traditional media planning and research methodologies. So you need to look broader than just at your own data, trying to optimize within that.
I think frequency is an interesting point, because it doesn't matter how good your creative is. If you only serve the ad once to one person, no one's ever going to remember it. I still see brands that still want to run 1 per lifetime frequency caps and 2 per lifetime frequency caps, which just when you're doing brand advertising is so stupid, because no one's going to remember it no matter how good the creative is. So it's finding this balance between great creative, the right frequency, which is really going to determine the success of the campaign.
And I also believe that the co-creation and the collaboration is also to be in-house, internally. Because again, when before launching or even thinking of putting down a marketing plan, you need to be well aware of your business strategy. So you have your business strategy as a company, as a brand, translated into marketing objectives. And the marketing objectives needs to work hand in hand with the product, with the creative side, and with the data. So again, it's a way of looking at things really with a 360-degree lens and trying to establish together that kind of path where, again, the final customers is not the end consumers anymore. It needs to come at a very, very early stage when you try to understand what we are going to build, why we are building this product, because there is a need. So again, even when we try and acquire our players and trying to nurture the relationship with them, nowadays, even when we're planning media, we need really to plan the media in a way that each of the media have a multiple function.
Yes.
When we plan social media, or not only to acquire players, but is to create that affinity with your brand and your product, which is part of the retention as well. So it's not anymore a path to acquisition, it's a path to loyalty, which a circle, it never stops.
Indeed. But to jump on the point you were making, I'd like to then pass it on to Ollie, who had mentioned his experience working sometimes with agencies and sometimes with advertisers. So from your experience working with both potential prospects or clients, where do you see the collaboration to be most effective when it comes to delivering on the co-creation?
Yeah, good question. So GumGum as a business, I would say predominantly, probably 80 or 90% of our investment comes from media agencies, right? So big brands, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, BMW, who employ an agency to run their media. There's some great things with that. They have big buying power. It's an easy communication line with us, but there's some inherent issues is that, I'm a sales guy. I'm very good at selling my company, but you're passing that on to another third party that ultimately then is selling it to the end client. So there's always going to get lost there. My new role, my new team focuses on brands that have in-house that that sort of media investment. And this is really prevalent in iGaming as an industry, which is what I really love, is that I am able to go and speak to the creative director, the head of brand, the head of media, and from a very early stage have a big steer on how the marketing campaign is going to run, you know, ultimately using our technology. And that's really refreshing and really new. And I think that's actually one of the strengths of iGaming, is that you're very much closer to that. And this really helps the collaboration process. I think, you know, internally, and I think, you know, with particularly with the bigger brands, there's always challenges internally, like getting the right people in. But as a third party, I can come in and be that sort of linchpin and bring people in for one sort of strategy meeting. The collaboration is significantly better than when you're doing it necessarily through a media agency. Things get lost in translation. You know, you're adding another party. So for me, it's a nice thing, and it's a great thing that iGaming does.
It's an interesting one. Go ahead.
No, I see a lot of different setups, of course, with the clients we're working with in all categories, with in-house teams, and then working with hybrid approaches with agencies or full agency setups, you know, with a holding company level. And you know, even though we see great value from the AI, from the algorithms and all of that, but I would really push also for the team. You know, you also need an A team, if I'm going to continue with the A's here, because it's the people. I mean, it's the people in the in-house teams, it's the people on the agency that will make, you know, the whole difference and create a success.
You know, if you don't hire good people, like it won't work.
Yeah,
right?
no, so it's not. Yeah, technology, data, all of that is important, but it's also about, you know, having the team. And then, you know, in my experience, you know, it can be great success, great media ROI with all these different approaches. So it's not kind of, you know, in-house versus agency or hybrids. It's really about setting the KPIs and then having a good collaboration in the team.
Sure.
I like that. It brings me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, what sort of specific talent and resources that do you think, you know, the iGaming industry would benefit from when it comes to some of those challenges that we're trying to overcome to really implement this POEM framework? Maybe you want to jump on, Valentina?
Yes. Well, the first one that came to my mind is to have a strategic, 300 strategic manager, someone who could actually see the entire journey with, again, a 360 lens. And then, obviously, a product marketeer and someone who is smart and a data guru within the MarTech spaces.
I think also just more diversity in this space, and it's been a common theme with quite a lot of the talks that we've had already today, is that most people that work in iGaming have worked in iGaming for a really long time. So you're not getting good expertise from outside of the industry, from bringing people from like more like your background, of an agency background maybe, or, you know, someone from a tech background that's worked with other verticals within marketing. And I think that's a real challenge, is that, you know, iGaming kind of recruits internally all the time, but you need to be pulling more people from more backgrounds with a wider range of experience in order to kind of better inform their marketing strategy, I think.
Without taking a position, but I am. It's music to my ears. But yeah, very good, very good. Now, we have 12 minutes left, and I think that we need to bring this topic. I think it's a juicy one, and it's fantastic to actually have all four of you here, but I think that this one is one that's been cooking for a long time. Cookieless. How does the POEM framework, or what is the POEM framework's future in a world where the cookies might be removed by our great friends, Google? And what solution, what alternatives do we have in our pocket, in the back of our pocket, to actually overcome what might come, but it's been postponed for quite some time, maybe for another year, God knows, maybe it might never happen. But in this context, assuming that the cookies will vanish soon enough, perhaps for compliance reasons and privacy setting reasons that's been going on ever since GDPR really kicked in, what do you think that the future of POEM holds, and how could we actually overcome some of those challenges in the near future?
Well, firstly, I need to say thank you to Google for getting rid of cookies. I work for a contextual technology platform, so in light of the announcement, even if they are kicking the can down the road a little bit at the moment, we've seen great growth in contextual. So for us, whether it's, you know, looking at that framework specifically, we really believe that contextual is the way forward. And we talked about this before, but I'm a 33-year-old male, right? And in theory, I should like football and football betting, right? I'm the key person for a lot of brands, and they'll establish that using third-party data and say, Ollie, he's a 33-year-old male, he's going to want to bet on sports, but actually I don't like football. So that's wasted advertising on me because I have very little interest. So what we see as the future as a business is saying, well, look, that doesn't make sense anymore. And now what we're doing is by putting a contextually relevant ad in the right environment, it's got a much higher chance for a success. So if I'm looking at football, sports scores, for example, I'm much more likely to be interested in betting on football than I would be based off some cookie data that often is like 30 or 60 days old. So for us, with this framework in mind, contextual is the future, but also is kind of old-fashioned as well, right? So Fredrik, talk about the first banners that you sold. That was contextual, right?
50% click-through rate back in the
50% click-through rate, yeah.
Win ice cream for a full year. Click here. It was 50%.
but to make sure that the audience understands what we're talking about, how many of you work in marketing? Can you raise your hands? Okay, it would be like almost 50%. So who doesn't work in marketing? Okay.
3, 4.
Who understands what contextual targeting is? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Well, I think I might give it to you, Oliver. Oh. Can you explain, I know it's unprepared, but who Google is and what Google created in 1999?
Yeah.
Because you guys created contextual.
So we're an up-and-coming company. Really hopeful things will kick off. Bear with us, okay? Just bear with us. So the idea of contextual targeting is you are a sports betting brand with a football ad and appearing that against football content. In theory, demographic and other targeting, affinity targeting isn't necessarily necessary because if they're looking at that content, they're going to be a target audience. And kind of demographics is kind of an old school way of building a pen portrait of an audience. Ultimately, arguably, it's a bit lazy. Truth be told, this day and age is what's available to us. I think if we go back to the point around privacy and the importance of that, so yes, we will be removing third-party cookies from the open web, and it's now being pushed to the end of 2023, and let's see where that goes from there. It is shaking up the industry, there's no lies about that, but that's for 3 reasons ultimately. One is user expectations. Users want more control about their privacy, and I think it's important that as advertisers and marketers, we need to respect that. And regulation has come in through the likes of GDPR, CCPA to enforce that as well. And then finally, there's also browser controls. So likely heard of Apple and ATT and what they're enforcing on their devices and their browsers too, limiting first and third-party cookie usage. The user now needs to opt in for that data to be shared and used elsewhere. And this obviously creates a tricky situation. If you're not looking for a contextual environment and you want maybe some broader scale, like Fredrik mentioned at the start, and that's where you start to experiment what's the optimal reach versus the optimal frequency for my target audience. That's where this all really starts to play in part. I guess the challenge for advertisers and marketers is ultimately how do you get users to opt in and want to share that data? And it goes back to what we said at the start. You can no longer just shout about your brand. There needs to be some form of value exchange. So what are you offering the user? Then want to go, okay, I will actually share my data with this advertiser, with this operator, because there's something in it for me. There's a bit of value here. This then goes into the piece we touched before about breaking down their silos as an operation. So a lot of data will sit within one part of the business, say your retention team, one sits with the acquisition team, one sits with Joe in the corner, and no one knows what Joe does. But there's data everywhere. And there's a job here of breaking down those silos and being able to collect as much data as possible in a privacy-first manner. And there are tools out there now to do that will last you for the next 5, maybe 10 years. But once you have that data, there are then tools able for you to analyze it. And that can inform your targeting, it can inform your creative, it can teach you new behaviors about your audiences. And then it allows you to then access that data and use it from a paid media stance. I think that's where it all kind of comes together. If we understand the privacy landscape, what that means now, and we act now, we don't wait for the end of 2023 and all panic. So we need to get ahead of that as one. Collect that data, have the tools in place to analyze it, whatever they may be. So analytical tools that break down web and mobile, or web and app, should I say. And then have the tools to then access it from a marketing perspective. And it could be for a CRM list, it could be for distributing your owned emails going out there. or it could be from a paid media stance, going across social or display, or whatever it might be, with a personalized message that actually adds value to that user's experience. And I think that's the challenge we have going ahead.
Thank you. I think that we have 5 minutes left. I have one last question, which is pretty much relevant to where we're heading. But we have a track where there's been a lot of panels discussing the metaverse. And I think that this is one of those that we could bring in. My question is, if we refer to the media landscape the way we relate to today, meaning the usual touch points we face on magazines, platforms such as Facebook or YouTube, etc. Do you think that, Valentina, that the metaverse could have its own poem, or would it be another sort of media that would, that would be part of the poem the way we know it today?
Okay, first of all, I think from today, we can actually establish the C poem. So the co-created, paid on, and earned framework. I think this type of framework is adding a layer of complexity to what we'll be doing in the metaverse, because the opportunities there are limitless. And when we refer to metaverse today, we don't have a definition yet, but I envision it as a massive network full of VR, augmented reality, immersive experiences, crypto, blockchain, something that cannot be replicated in the real life. So I think from a technology and measurement point of view, we are adding a layer of complexity. At the same time, though, yes, of course, there are advertising opportunities there. Roblox launched very, very recently the in-game advertising marketplace. Yes. So again, I think nowadays we could reshape certain KPIs, certain maybe more conservative ways at looking at advertising in a really new paradigm. And yes. I believe it's a completely new economy. We are living a new passion metaverse economy today.
Absolutely, I agree with you on this one. But for the rest of the panel, where are we as far as being able to advertise in games and in the metaverse?
So I know you're a big metaverse advocate. I'm still yet to be convinced, but I think I'm behind on the times. Our stance at GumGum is that at the moment it's just an extra media channel. Every media channel needs to have its own KPIs and be measured slightly differently. But for us, particularly with the in-game advertising piece, we're seeing it as a very innovative, but ultimately, something similar to connected TV or, display or paid social or something along the lines of that. So I think it will change. I think that there's a lot of room to grow here. But from our stance as a business at the moment, we have the ability to advertise in game. But for us, it's an additional line item in a media plan at the moment.
How about you, Fredrik? Any point of view?
I'm going to create an avatar to do media performance benchmarking so we can meet there in the metaverse. No, I think it's early. It's about testing now and see, learning, staying ahead of the curve. In an optimistic scenario, it would be possible to have it like a single source data point as well, where you can track the persons there, from exposure to action to what they're buying, which is a challenge with the silos that we discussed here today. What is really working, what is not working, how do you break that down? So if everything is within one system, you could track it in a different way. But then, of course, you have regulation, privacy, and those areas that will enter. But it's exciting for sure. It's early now. In gaming, which is like another topic, that's important because that's where you get some eyeballs. Yes. We know about the TV consumption behavior that that you need to be really precise to reach the right audience, and also with the evolution of cookies, etc. Here, it's important to find those audiences where they spend time. So from that reason, from a media perspective, it's important to be able to build your reach there.
How about you, Oliver?
I'm not sure how it's going to end up. I'm excited about what is to come next. I think ultimately it will allow for a deeper engagement between brands and their target audience. I think that's what it's going to enable. I think there's examples of that already when you look at instances with like Fortnite the game and music gigs within that happening and people exploring that. You're seeing that within an NFT space. You can attend a baseball game and get an NFT after that lives on with you. and keeps whoever hit the home run that day. You get the scores updated within it and allows for that continued engagement between the brand and the user. And I think that's the form it's going to take. How it actually materializes, let's see. But it's exciting regardless.
Thank you. We have 30 minutes, no,
30
seconds left. Do we have time for questions or, yes? Yeah? Does anybody in the audience have any questions to ask to the audience? I mean, we're about to end this, this panel, but if you have any questions to the panelists, please let us know. Maybe microphone?
Hello. No. Hello, good afternoon. My name is John Paul Stavala. I'm social media manager at The Weekend. The question I have is for you, Oliver. It's about the latest Google format, the short video format on YouTube. Can you tell us like a little bit about that? Obviously, like co-creation for YouTube has been happening for some time. So I'm just interested, you know, why Google took that direction and what we can do as marketers to take advantage of it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question. So for those that aren't familiar, so we launched YouTube Shorts in September 2020, and it's short form video on YouTube. And it's a pivot from the platform going from long form content to multi-format content. To date, we've had, over the last 2 years, we've had 5 trillion views. We're now getting 30 billion views via YouTube Shorts every single day. So it is mainstream, it is here. In terms of how brands can leverage it, I think this goes back to kind of about kind of test and learn and kind of creative engagement. Looking from an owned media side, it gives brands another way in which they get a bit closer towards their audience and the content which they have. A good example of shorts would be, say, Live Score, for instance, for people familiar with them. They have people down by the side of the pitch taking content of the game as it happens, off the ball action, but allowing fans to get a bit closer to the on-the-field action versus some of the more long-form content that's a bit more polished, for instance. They have broadcasting full games, for instance, within that. So I think it's for creators to play around with overall, but I think it allows them to be a bit more rough and ready with their content. It doesn't have to be the polished article. It goes on there, it's short form, it's another touch point in which to engage that audience.
And I think, Ollie, it's, if I may, it's competing also a bit against TikTok short video. Because if we contextualize everything in this new way of shaping up our brand, we can easily use either TikTok or the short YouTube video to capture the most hilarious moments of a streaming happening. So now that Twitch is banning some of the streamings, we can actually take advantage and use several other platforms. I'm lucky enough to be part of a group of Happy Hour, of a company which is actually offering several opportunities to be leading the competitive age. And yes, there are definitely new formats to capture that kind of emotional feeling of the players, to build and reinforce the brand affinity with the operators.
Fantastic. One more, finished? This is it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Valentina, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.